Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. Uh, we're going to talk today about the beginning, the creation. It's always a question about what's real, what's true. And so we're going to talk today about what is real, what is true, what we believe. So it's what to believe, science or the Bible. And the topic of creation has been debated for many years. It's been talked about with very different views on the creation of man, the creation of the universe, the evolution of man. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, so don't think that I do. It's just what I do have, I'll present to you, and you can make your own assessment at what you believe when we're done. And who knows, you may decide that you change your mind. I know that I did. Being a Christian, I had one view, and as I continued to study this and learn more about it, I changed my views on things. So you may do the same thing. So we'll go ahead and begin to explore these questions about creation. The origin of the cosmos. In science class, we learned different ways of how everything began. Since the Bible begins with Genesis and the creation, that's where we're going to begin, or that's why we're going to begin with the cosmos. Started in the first chapter, creating the earth. We're going to take a look at the origin of the cosmos. A lot of people ask how old the earth is. It's kind of, we find that it might be difficult to tell how old it is or measure the age of the earth, but there is a way to do that, and we'll talk about that. There's different views on the age of earth. One comes from the scientific world, those that either teach or have learned about science. They have their views on it. There's two other views that come from a biblical standpoint, and we'll talk about those. Some look at earth as young, and some look at the earth as very old. Those that look at it as young, they believe that it's 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And those that look at it as an old earth view, it's about billions of years old. So we're going to look at those as well. From the science view, scientists believe in a theory called the Big Bang Theory, which I think we've all heard of. And I'm not talking about the TV show. I'm talking about what's in the cosmos up in the very beginning of time. The Big Bang Theory, a lot of people thought it was just an explosion, but that is not the case. Big Bang represents the fact that it was rapid, that it expanded. Everything just kind of expanded. And in fact, we're still expanding. The universe is still growing and just continues to grow. And some might, technical difficulties happen on occasion. There we go. This rapid process is known as the cosmic inflation. And from the intense heat, the universe began to cool down, causing subatomic particles which formed and led to the creation of hydrogen and helium. Once the universe cooled enough, those atoms formed, allowing light to travel, which left a glow called the cosmic microwave background radiation. And that's how they have the evidence that it was the Big Bang Theory, or that they use to support that theory. This theory has been evolving over time with new discoveries every day, all the time, finding new stars, new everything that is in the cosmos. Scientists continue exploring those questions about the universe in the earliest moments, but they may have, or what began with the Big Bang? How did it begin? People have the question of how did the Big Bang begin? Nobody knows. NASA can't even come up with answers that caused the Big Bang. It just happened. Now, I find that hard to believe myself. Things just don't poof in the air. You cannot have just combust into existence. However, they do measure the age of the universe. Scientists use many tools to do this. One of the tools is radiometric dating, which measures the radioactive decay. And it's kind of like carbon dating. If you've ever heard of carbon dating, some believe that it's not very accurate. And true, to measure the dating of the Earth, carbon dating would not be accurate, because carbon can only be measured up to 5,700 years old. And if we're looking at the Earth being billions of years old, we're not going to be able to do it with carbon dating. However, it can be measured through other ways, like uranium or thorium. Going back to carbon dating, some people say that it can't be used, but we use it with igneous rocks, and we test it often, and it measures many times as they compare those accuracies within 2% of their comparisons. Carbon dating is actually used for things like the Dead Sea Scrolls or the igneous rocks to see where dates are on those. But the uranium and the thorium, which changes to lead, that can measure up to 4.5 billion years or even 14 billion years. And so this is their way of measuring using that kind of dating. Another way is starlight dating. Starlight dating is another way that the universe can be measured. And according to Dr. Erica Carlson, she's a physicist at Purdue University, and starlight can actually tell the temperature of a star, the element composition of a star, the distance of a star, even the age of a star. With the starlight measurement, scientists are able to measure the sun. And it's estimated that the sun is about 5 billion years old. So if the sun can be 5 billion years old, then there's no reason that the earth couldn't be about that or even a little less. So through science, we have made many discoveries about the age of the earth. And when we come to the biblical view, the religious side, there are two views of the age of the earth. As I said before, the young earth creationists who believe the earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old, and the other is going to be the old earth creationists who believes that the earth is billions of years old. And based on science, these two creationists do believe in science. And so based on science, the old earth creationists believe the earth is billions of years old, just like the scientists do, because of the evidence that the scientists have found in places like the Grand Canyon. The evidence that was found was fossils and the sedimentary rock. So how can marine fossils exist in the upper areas of the Grand Canyon? If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, you've seen how deep and wide it is. And so the argument would be, well, how can that be possible? And some of these sedimentary rocks that you see there in the Grand Canyon, they actually have tested it, and some of the dirts and sands are from other areas of the world. So how could that even be possible? And you can actually see the layers as you look at the Grand Canyon, all those different layers that are in the rocks. We turn to Deborah Haarsman, who is what they call OEC, and that's your old earth creationist. And she explains that the marine fossils could have occurred through rock formed from the sediment on a continental shelf below the sea level, then was elevated to mountain height by the motion of the continental plates. So the shifting of the plates would have shifted everything, and that is why, even though it was on the ground level or the sea level, it would have gone up and that's how we can find it on the top of the Grand Canyon. She also continues that the layers are not in uniform over the entire continent, that the rock formation occurred over multiple periods. So when you look at those layers, that's the different periods of those layers. So it's multiple periods of these plates rising and falling. It is the rock formations that we find at the Grand Canyon that can show those discrete layers. She also points out that there are billions of dead things buried in the rock, but the species are not mixed. Like I said, they are layered on top of each other, which gives the claim, or she suggests, that the earth was covered with water at a time. The entire earth was covered. However, it was not from Noah's flood, but it would have been at the beginning of time. Noah's flood you read in Genesis 9, but we're talking about the creation. So therefore it's in Genesis 1. Harzma is not the only one who believes this. We can actually turn to Krista Bontrager, and she refers to Genesis 1 and 2. She also believes that the earth was once covered with water before the flood that Noah had. And Bontrager is also an old earth creationist who asks the question, how long are the days of creation that we read about in Genesis 1? She looks closely at the scriptures in 1 and 2 and does not doubt the abilities of God. She believes God could still, he has the power to just snap his fingers, speak the word, and things happen. But she looks at this and interprets those scriptures as more than a 24-hour period. And that's where the science portion comes in to know how long or how old Earth is. In Psalms 94, it says that 1,000 years in your sight is like a day that has just gone by. So one day to man could be 1,000 years to God. So even though we are experiencing one day, this one day could be 1,000 years to God. So when you read in Genesis where it says, this is the day, day one, that day one may have been existing for man or for a person, but for God it was thousands of years. Bontrager, when pointing out that the earth was originally covered with water, she refers to Genesis 1:6, when God separated the water from water. He created a vault and put water above the vault and put water below the vault. And this would have created the hydrologic cycle. Easier said, you have water down below, evaporates up, goes into the sky, rain comes down. That whole cycle of water. And so that's what he began when he separated the waters. And this would have actually started that process so plants would be able to begin to grow. And there would be water set for animals that would have been created, or even man would have been created. But it also, because of the plants, it began the proper oxygen level that would be able to sustain man and animal. So God took a scientific way of creation. The second creationist under the biblical view is the young earth creationists that believe earth was 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And they look at Genesis literally in that first chapter that it was 24 hours. Ken Ham, who is an author of the view of the young creationists, the young earth creationists, his argument was that the scriptures of Genesis are true and discusses real events in real time. Looking at Genesis 1, Ham points out that the scripture says the earth was formed and then came the light. As he continues, Ham points out that each day existed on its own. However, there is nothing that truly defines what a day is. other than after each day it's mentioned there's evening and there's morning. So this theory, of course, is not very supported by the scientific discoveries. When you look at these discoveries that we talked about between the carbon dating and between the starlight dating, they show that we've been around a lot longer, and that does not equate to what Ham is saying. So let's move to the origin of life. After we've created the world, or God has created the world, He's going to create man, and the origin of life is about the creation of man. And so we're going to look at the scientific view as well as the two creationist view. From the viewpoint of scientists, man was not created but evolved. If man was created, there is no evidence that the creation wasn't a monkey or an ape or some sort of animal being. And Scripture simply states that man was created in the image of God, and this is not in the image physically, but it's actually His virtues. So, not saying that God looks like an ape. The image is more of His virtues and His characteristics. So there's been many studies by anthropologists and human biologists that compare the bone structure of ape and humans. And these studies have shown that vertebrae, as well as the crania and even the dental features, are similar between humans and apes. They also have opposable digits where they can grab things and do things. So they identical, or they look the same. And the presence of a well-developed clavicle in primates adds solidity to the shoulders. So even the primates can do pretty much everything that we do. So these studies demonstrate that humans and apes, or primates, are the same physicality as well as their structure. So it's very likely that humans, structurally speaking, evolved from primates. A prominent historian of science and an agnostic, his name is Ronald Numbers, says that with evolution, you don't start with anything perfect. You start with primitive little wiggly things, which evolve into apes and finally humans. According to science, this evidence that supports the argument is that primates are 57 to 90 million years old. That kind of lines up with what we've already talked about with the age of the earth. The timeline of human evolution is about 4 billion years old, and the divergence of the primates and humans was between 9 million and 6.5 million years ago, which was towards the end of the Miocene epoch. This would also align with the age of the earth. But I'd like to point out also that the belief in evolution does not reject the idea that God does not exist. God would have been the creator, and He could have created or would have created the animals, the ape that we would have formed into. However, there are some scientists that do not negate the fact that God was the creator. Like Galileo, Kepler, and Boyle viewed their scientific work as the study of the very handiwork of God, and fitting calling for Christians. And this does not mean that all scientists have the same faith or believe in the Almighty. It means that scientists are human and stand on their beliefs based on the science that they find. But it also allows them to evolve into believers if the science they find leads them to that decision. From a biblical standpoint on the creation of man, we have the OEC and the YEC both agreeing that creation of man, the Hugh Ross is also another old creationist, and he writes this regarding Neanderthals. Genetics have recovered DNA from humans, dating as far back as 25,000 years ago. The range of diversity for human DNA does not overlap Neanderthals in any way. This observation, coupled with marked differences in the DNA, establishes beyond a reasonable doubt that Neanderthals did not contribute to the human gene pool, meaning they could not find any evidence where man came from the Neanderthals. Scripture tells us that man was created by God, created in his own image. Billy Graham says this: the Bible is not a book of science. He believes that God created man, and whether it came up by an evolutionary process, and at a certain point he took this person or being and made him a living soul or not, does not change the fact that God did create man. Even if the view of the creation of man evolved, there was and is a God who created before the creation evolved. So Hugh Ross talks about two books that we look at when we're looking at creation. One is the book of nature, and two is the book of Scripture. When you're trying to decide on what you believe, it's difficult to take just one without the other. But when you put it together to see which ones match, that's going to be the truth. With all the evidence that we have seen, both science and the Bible should work together to unravel the mysteries of creation. Each discipline can provide an important corrective to the other. One discipline should not drive the conclusion of the other. Science should not dictate the best biblical interpretation, and biblical studies should not force the conclusions of science. This means that the information we seek and find from either science or the Bible must support each other. You cannot expect science to be completely right without testing it against the Bible, and you cannot expect the Bible to be completely right without checking it against science. God created nature for us to see. He also created the Scripture for us to read. Putting them together is how we find out more about God. Hugh Ross states that there is a book of nature and the book of Scripture. These two books must align to find the truth. I have concluded that there is still more evidence to sift through and to gather. We should never stop searching for the truth. We should always continue to look and search through science and through biblical studies, Scripture. We should not rely on one or the other, but rely on both. I believe that the earth is 14 billion years old, and it's based on the evidence that I have seen. There are compelling arguments that we'd evolve. However, I am still sticking to the idea that God created man and that we did not evolve. Of course, I hope today that the presentation that I gave, the information that I gave, helped you make decisions of your own. Do we have any questions? No questions. Do we have a question? Yes. Yes, they can. As far as the question was, do the layers in the sediment of the rock, if the scientists can measure how long they've been there. The method I did not look through, but I do know that they can measure how long they've been there. just based on the different sediments that are there and layered. They can tell those differences. Any other questions? All right. Well, this concludes everything. Thank you guys for coming.